Welcome to Tech Shorts. How can you create strong and unique passwords that you won't forget? Well, it's not as difficult as it may seem. And while no password is infallible, the stronger it is, the harder it is to crack. Now, there's a lot of talk about how to make your password strong, and really, what does that mean for you? And how do you make a strong password? In this Tech Short, you're going to learn some advice on how to craft unique passwords. But something indecipherable for cybercriminals can often mean it's similarly difficult for you to remember too. So to help you with this, we're going to discuss how to remember your passwords. So a long password is a strong password. And in this case, 25 plus characters is a great starting point for every single password that you have. Obviously, the longer and more complex, the better, because that makes it harder for individuals to crack those passwords. And it makes them tough to remember, unfortunately. I know that this is a lot for most people, but computers today are so much faster, and shorter passwords are just easier to crack. So we want to hit that 25 plus character mark. The best way to protect against that is to create the long and complex passwords like we talked about, but the problem with those is that they are sometimes too complex to remember, and we struggle with remembering them, and especially with the sequence of potentially randomized letters and numbers and symbols. That is why we are going to look at some ways to solve this. And in this case, we're going to look at things like nursery rhymes and music lyrics and technical jargon as some of the few that we're going to look at, but you can also use sentences, phrases, and quotes as well. Now, one of the things that we can do is we can also look at creating what are called password rule sets. And what those do is they help us to avoid common character exchanges. And we'll go over that a little bit more in just a moment. And what we're also going to look at is how you can actually create your own custom encryption algorithm. Then lastly, we're going to look at how we can store our passwords. And in storing it, we're going to look at creating storage encryption. So it's creating an encryption algorithm for storing our passwords as well. And then we'll also cover using a password manager as an option. Now, these are just a few of the ways that people remember passwords and store passwords. And we're going to get a little bit further into this before we actually get into the specific element of creating a password using some of those things like nursery rhymes, sentences, phrases, quotes, music lyrics, or jargon. 25 plus characters for every password, and one unique password for every login and website. We want to make sure we don't reuse passwords and that we're creating a new password for every site. But this is where our password rule set is really going to make a huge difference. What you're going to do is create a rule set to change a phrase in some sort of way. First, let's talk about common character exchanges. There's a bunch that you may or may not be familiar with, but in this case, things like 4 equals A, or 3 equals E, or 7 equals T. This is good, but everybody, including hackers, pretty much know these. And they use it to crack their passwords by adding it to their algorithm. So how can we look at this and change this a little bit better? So what you should do is something similar, but create a rule that's a lot more random than that one. So in this case, we're going to create our own encryption cipher. Maybe instead of A equaling 4, we're going to have it as the @ sign. And the curly brace, the left curly brace, is going to equal E. And we might do something like a question mark to equal T. So what we're going to look at is, let's say this is our password. Our password for this is the United States of America. What we're going to go through is using our cipher, and we're going to change the information so that each A is an @ sign, each E is the curly brace, and each T is a question mark. And what we'll come up with is this. Now, if we know that this is our cipher and this is what we use, you can see where the second version is going to be a lot more difficult to crack. It makes sense to you because you know your cipher, but it's not going to make sense to a computer algorithm. We can also replace letters for combinations of symbols, which is going to make things even more secure. You can expand your encryption cipher. And what this means is this. Let's say instead of the @ sign, we choose @ / and star to equal A. And then we have curly brace, left bracket, right bracket to equal E, and question mark, %, and 2 to equal T. Well, now if we look at this same example with the United States of America, this is what our new password would look like. And because we know what our cipher is, this gibberish on the bottom is not going to make sense to any computer or anywhere else, but it's going to make sense to us. And what we're doing by creating this cipher is we're creating our own encryption. You're constructing your own rules for an algorithm. That's exactly what you're doing. Now, what's interesting is that this new password we created in the bottom is 46 characters long. However, this is really a great way to create your own passwords, but make sure that you write down your rules somewhere. You want to make sure you know exactly what those rules are. Now, what does that actually do? We need to be able to store these somewhere. But here's a way to do it to make it a little bit more secure. So let's say you have your typical storage spots for passwords. Notes on a phone, new contacts, or written in a book. We could look at this and say that this system for creating passwords that I outlined before, by replacing certain characters of the password for different characters, you could actually store the password the way that it was written before you change those characters. That way, even if somebody finds your list of passwords, they're unlikely to get into your account because they don't know what your personal algorithm is. But you can make it even safer than that. You can create rules for storing passwords as well. Let's say we use numbers, and if we use numbers, we're going to divide by 2 or 3. So in this case, any password that has a 4 actually means 2. If there's a 9, it equals 3. If it's 2 digits like 56, it equals 28. In this case, if we use a password that was like this, N9WP8SS564044, exclamation point, it would turn into this. And you can see that I used that same common character exchange for the first bit, the new pass, because 3 equals E, 4 equals A. I just wanted to give you a representation of what you could do if you like those things, and it makes it easier for you to remember. But in this case, you can see that the 9 turns into 3 because it's odd number divided by 3. The 8 turns into a 4, 56 turns into 28. The 4 is a 2, 0 remains 0, and the 2 4s are 22. So easy way to change this. And this is something you can remember. You could write down 2, 3, whatever it might be. You could change this any way that you would like to. In this instance, let's say that you use sentences to shorten your clues. But when you're storing your information, your password, it doesn't mean that you actually have to write down the whole thing. So let's show this for instance. So the itsy bitsy spider might be what your password is when it begins, and you just write down spider. In your book, in your note, in whatever, you have your login, and then underneath password you put spider. Now, nobody else is going to know that you're talking about the itsy bitsy spider, but you will. Meanwhile, if you had something like Sweet Caroline, you could just name it Carol. Or if you had OEM versus aftermarket parts, you could just put parts. The best way to do this is actually to look at using a password manager. Now, these actually create random passwords that are generated using multiple different types of special characters, upper and lower case, that make no sense, that don't relate to anything. But if you don't trust them, here's a way that you can actually create, remember, and store your passwords and not have to worry about anybody seeing them, especially if you're doing it physically or if you're using a phone or a document. One preferred method of coming up with complex passwords, even those that require 25-character decryption keys, is the song lyric technique. Choose one of your favorite song lyrics. Using the first letter of each sentence, replace certain letters with numbers and follow that up with some form of punctuation and special characters at the end. And if your favorite song lyric is too long, just crop it out or choose a certain portion of it to work with. So in this case, we're using a line from Sweet Caroline. One of the things we're going to do is use the first letter of each word, and our cipher is going to be C equals 2, G equals \, I equals 3, and S equals /. One caveat with this is that hackers do add well-known song lyrics to their lists when they crack passwords. So the cipher will make a big difference in this option. Here's our cipher. We're using the first letter of each word, C equals 2, G equals backslash, I equals 3, and S equals /. In this instance, this would be our new password. As you can see, some of the smaller words, in this case, I didn't capitalize the S in between these two characters, but this is how you can get lowercase and capitalized letters in your passwords. What this turned into was a 25 character long password that has numbers, letters, uppercase and lowercase characters, and special characters as well. All you have to do is recite the lyric and know your cipher when you're typing in your new password.